name's Gibson, I work with Corrections Canada. I'll do my little bio, I guess. I'm a program officer for most of my career. I have done some parole work, so I have a little bit of knowledge in that side of the field. But I do prefer working with the guys, trying to help them move forward. In the last handful of years, I've been working specifically with sex offenders. So I guess I'm somewhat of a specialist, yeah, right? But that's the area that I focus, and that's why I get invited to these wonderful sessions. So I've already answered one of the hardest questions I'll get today, is what's Kelly's position, because I started to sweat there for a second. So that was kind of a good icebreaker. I went over the notes that were given to me. Maureen had sent them over. Linnea and Maureen sent them over. And I went through, and I'm hoping that I answer a lot of those questions and provide some of that insight today. One of the things I focused on in today's presentation was just sort of how to get, how to focus on what to work with our and sorry for the term, I use offenders. I know that when I talk to the guys, I refer to them by their first name usually, but when I'm referring to them in reports and stuff, I'm always referring to them as offenders. It's sort of the language that we use in corrections. So it's not meant to be insulting or anything like that. It's ingrained in my head. So I will try to use core member, but bear with me. So I don't have a whole lot of time. I think I have an hour, so I'm going to try to. Okay. So I'll try to not rush through, but I'll try to answer all your questions. Maybe I'm here for most of the day, so I think I could probably answer questions throughout the day during lunch break and stuff like that too. So if there's more specific things that you want to ask me after, that's fine too. Any questions before we get started?
No, go for it.
Okay, just fire away.
We do have till 10, 12, 10 to 12.
10 to 12. So if it goes a little perfect, okay. So I'll probably, that's actually great. I'll probably have some time to take more questions at the end then. I'm hoping this is about an hour, but we'll see. All right, so last time I was here, we were looking at sort of how correctional programs works, and I'm hoping everybody sort of still has that in their minds. I'm not really going to repeat that today. I'm really going to focus on what to look for when you're working with these guys, right? Maureen and I discussed a lot of things on the phone, quite frequently, as she said, and we've been sort of discussing different strategies to connect both CoSA with corrections, I think, linking that partnership a little better. And I think that's really important. So I think the more we know or how our guys work and what they need to work on, we can relay that information back and forth and really pinpoint some of the issues and struggles that these guys are having to help them forward. So that's what I'm going to kind of try to uncover today, is just sort of, what aren't they telling me? What are they telling me? What can I help them with? What problems are they facing? And I'm going to kind of go into a little bit of a triage approach to it, and I'll explain that as I go. So thanks again for having me. Mentorship. So last time I finished off the presentation, I went over these sort of topics at the end, or these points. Obviously in our groups, the key thing is our rapport, right? So getting to know the people that we're working with, that's going to be the key to understanding each other, being comfortable with each other. We have to be careful with our boundaries and how much they know about us, but we have to let them also know that we're human and that we make mistakes, and be comfortable sharing our emotions and showing our struggles too, right? Because that's the reality of our work, and that's where you're going to build most of your rapport and getting to know these guys. I know you guys do this very well, defining the roles. You're the volunteers, they're the client. I know that's at the start of your CoSA meetings with a new core member. So I won't spend much time on that, but that's a real focus. Trying hard to see past our own judgments and biases. That's really important. You guys wouldn't be here here if you didn't do that. But it is still hard. I mean, we're running into a lot more transgender. There's other issues that are coming up that do challenge our own biases, and we have to look past those things and to work with these people and build that rapport. So keeping that in mind. This one's the biggest one for me, and I think we should all really pay attention to it. What are our limitations? And if I run into those limitations, or I feel those limitations, what do I do with it? And how do I learn from them? And you guys are working with 3 people all the time. I wish that was my daily, to lean on people to talk to. And I do lean on Maureen, and I think Maureen leans on me as well. I lean on some of my colleagues, and that's going to be the biggest thing, is lean on your what do you guys call yourselves as a group? Circle members. And so that's a big thing that you're going to have to do, right? And be really honest, let the ego go a bit, right? And know your client's limitations. That's going to be the biggest thing to getting to know your offender. Knowing their limitations, knowing why they make the bad decisions they make, knowing why maybe they just don't have the skills to learn the stuff that we're trying to educate and teach them, because maybe there's cognitive issues. So knowing those limitations is really important. Focusing on risks and results. We talked about that last time I was here. That's why I brought this up again. We talked about the crime cycle. Does everybody remember all that? Just try to, so trying to really understand how they got there, right? Because the offense doesn't happen just out of the whip. It's a clear development or build up into committing the offense. There's very few offenders that I've met where that's their total objective in life is to commit a sex offense. There are a few that I've met, but they're not getting into jail anytime soon. But the most of them, it's sort of something that happens at the end of a cycle, right? So how do we interfere and intercept that cycle, right? So that they're honest with us and we can trust me to come forward and say, hey, I'm going down this road. I work with these guys all the time. They tell me how great everything is, all the time. Anybody else have that problem? Right? How do we get past that? How do we know what's really going on? Yes, we have to figure out how do we know what the problems are? So that's what I'm going to focus in on today, is just sort of trying to figure out what's going on behind the layers of the identity, right? And then we talked about some skill-based stuff. I'm going to teach a few things that we do in programs today. I'm going to educate you on a few of the topics that we focus on, that these guys know inside and out. So if you bring it up and say, you're not being very accountable for whatever they're doing, you can use some of these skills to kind of break that, because they know these skills. I have not yet met a client who doesn't come out of prison, who's done the sex offender program, that can't spout off these skills. So it does give us a chance, unless there's some cognitive issues there, but even then they still have a little bit of a grasp. But if we can learn what those angles are, we can kind of come in the back door, so to speak, and catch them off guard and really bring out that honesty from them, right? So we'll talk about some of those skills today. Motivating, targeting day-to-day issues. Like I said, it's at the end of the cycle that they commit the offense. So we have to figure out what their problems are from day to day, because as they're going into their crime cycle, there's a bunch of mistakes happening, and they're making really poor decisions to cope with the things that are going on in their lives already. And it's just starting to build. And then challenging that problematic thinking. This is really hard. I do it all the time, and sometimes I leave the group. Maureen had asked me, we had touched base about a client 3 weeks ago. And I saw him, and he came in, and I mean, he set the stage beautifully. His arrogance and the way he was coming across. I thought, oh God, I'm going to nail him today. But even though I went at him and I challenged him, the whole time in my heart, I didn't know if I was doing the right thing. So it's really hard to challenge people. Right? Think of the last time somebody, your mother or your family member did something and you just kind of let it go. Because that's their personality. It's easier just to let it go. These guys, we can't really let it go. You gotta challenge them. And it's hard to. Alright. So help helping change behavior. That's what we do in programs. We're trying to reform behaviors, right? Our behaviors are the truth behind it all, is that our behavior is learned. Whether it's good, negative behavior, it is learned from someone, right? Why do you think somebody does a negative behavior and then continues to repeat that negative behavior later in life? Anybody have an answer to that? Yeah.
Because the negative behavior worked for them, so they can continue to do it because no one stops them.
Right? Get an example for me, just the top of your head. You're bang on.
Pardon me?
You're right on the mark with your answer.
Well, you know, if somebody lies when they're 3 years old and somebody believes them, they go, well, this technique works, I can keep on doing that.
That's right. And what is the client getting when someone buys into the lie?
Outsmarting.
Maybe it's the outsmarting,
Avoiding consequences.
avoiding a consequence, attention. There is something positive, there's a reinforcement, right? There's a gratification behind it. And so we continue to do that behavior, and that habit develops into habit. And then it keeps going, right? So that's what is happening with our guys. They are typically lacking a lot of skills, right? So why do our clients act the way they act? I was going to ask you that question. I've given you the answer already. But why do you think our clients act the way they act? Based on, the answer that Bob gave. Why do you think they act this way? At 40 years old, why are they being distant and always, everything's great?
It's conditioning that they've developed to survive.
Yeah, exactly what it is, right? And, sorry?
It's defensive.
It's defensive a lot of the time. That's exactly it, right? It's getting results, right? If you're trying to hide a behavior like child pornography, right? And you're doing it for years and years, and you're living two lifestyles, right? You had to find ways to present a different way, right? These behaviors, as Bob said, they can start very young, right? So if I'm growing up in a household that's broken and got lots of problems, right? Think of all the things these people are missing. All the skills are missing. It's hard as a parent today in a good, healthy environment to educate our children to do the right thing, to think the right way, to slow down and just identify an emotion and work through it, right? Imagine having a broken family and not getting any support, and maybe you're getting sexually abused yourself, right? How is that going to impact you 30 years down the road? And what did you do to survive those 10, 15, 20 years? All those behaviors you're talking about. That's how they survived. Yeah.
One example, if I can give it, is that we have one gentleman, Steve and I, and he's in our group, and what he really appreciates that we provide for him is some motivation and to give him alternate things. He's come from a family, it's the third generation now of social assistance, and he's starting to work, and we got him to work, and then he stopped and he was going back again, and even he commented just the other day, he's got another job now, we keep on pushing him. It's not just the work, it's just not the money, because he's got disability, so he doesn't have to work. It's covered. So we're saying, but this isn't right. You know, like you have to, you're able and stuff. And even he came to our meeting last week and even said, my grandmother says, why are you working? And he's able-bodied, 29 years old, and able to do it. But that's that mentality he has to live with. So he's learning new ways, and like you said, you know, they act the way they act because that's the way they've been taught, and it's to break those things. Yes.
Great answer, or great example, and I'm going to build off that throughout today because we have to remap the immediate gratification or the gratification they're getting, right? So if you're trying to teach somebody who's got, and we're running into it now as 5 generations. Because, if we went back to the 1940s, I didn't live back then, but I'm assuming our welfare system wasn't very good, right? The negative of our welfare system is you have 5 generations of people living on. Bogey, I think, is one of the slang terms for it. So you develop this lifestyle. The gratification you get from it, it works, right? You learn to manipulate the system. You get really good at it, fifth generation. So we have to remap that. So getting this young man or older gentleman that they're working with their core member to realize that, hey, this feels good. I like this. Is that remapping? We're filling in the gratification with a response to a behavior that he's doing that's positive, but he's getting some sort of reward at the end of it, right? Not just money and financial, but all the things you're talking about. So we got to replace those things. Not so easy, actually. So no habitual behaviors are easily changed, obviously, especially when we believe our behavior works. This is really important for what I'm about to teach you. When's the last time you met somebody who maybe is a businessman, he's got lots of money, I'm thinking of a specific person I just dealt with recently. Things are going really well, and everything's a game to them. They have to get the best deal. It's really challenging. The person who was an Olympic swimmer, the one I'm talking about, like, it's just every time you talk to this guy about his work, he's always he's taking on a lawyer, he's taking on, right? And when you see that ego come out, how many times have you talked to that person, if you know that person out there, how to get through to them that maybe there's a different way to do things? Is it easy to get them and map them out? Maybe my idea is better than your idea? No, it's not easy. That's what we're dealing with a lot of the time with our guys, right? They are so stubborn. So how do you solve problems in our own lives? How do you guys solve problems? Let's come up with a five steps to solving a problem. First of all, what's the first thing you have to do to start solving problems?
Recognize
You have to recognize you have a problem.
Same answer from two people. Awesome. I'm not going to put them up because I can't remember how I did this. Oh, there it is. Awesome. Okay, that worked. What would be a second stage of solving a problem?
Forming a good relationship with them.
With the problem?
No, with him personally, in terms of beginning to trust us.
Oh, so having trust and faith in others. And,
Developing the trust.
okay, so yeah, for specifically for core members and stuff, definitely. That's number one, right? So that they can open up. But I just mean problems in general, right? If we're solving a problem in general in our own lives, how do you guys solve them? And first step, identify I have a problem, right? How do we identify we have problems?
Recognize the feelings and
Communication. It's always going to be emotional, right? Because if everything feels great, you're not going to feel that you have a problem. You would never notice you have a problem if everything felt great. But once you have some fear in there, oh, wait a second, I got a problem, right? So identifying that problem. Managing those emotions, right? Stage two, when we're problem solving, we're managing emotions. You have to figure out how to manage that and deal with it before we can move on, right? If I'm angry, well, you guys know the result. It's not going to be a great presentation. What else? Just throw some ideas at me of how you solve problems. If you had to throw some steps out there. Manage emotions, identify there's a problem.
Seek help.
Seek help. Ask somebody for their opinions, right?
Identify the alternatives.
Identify the alternatives, yep.
look at the pros and cons.
Look at the pros and cons. All of these things you guys are saying are exactly that, right? Pick those best solutions. When we're working with our guys, I'm going to get you to focus on this one a lot of the time. And this one. Because you're going to have to help them identify the problem, and then you're going to have to help them understand the facts of the problem. Because they're going to blame everything else on the problem than what the real problem is. I can guarantee it. And then we try our solutions and what have you. So that's how you all hear problem solving. Where did you get these skills from? Where did they come from?
Parents' education.
Education, parents, right?
Experience.
Experiences, all of the above, right? And we hopefully all have really really good upbringings and had a good run, right? And if we didn't, maybe it was our experiences and our resilience and all those things that allowed us, I guess it's all those things that led to building that resilience, but we move forward and learn, right? I use this because I know that some of my crowd is a little bit older than me. I actually have no idea what the $65,000 question show was. I have no idea who was the host. But my ex-father-in-law used to always...
64.
Oh, was it 64? There you go. I even got it wrong. So there you go. So my preamble into that joke or whatever, or reference is well equipped.
But at that age, you don't remember, so.
That's right. That's right. So the $64,000 answer, I said, is yeah, another question. It's always going to be questions, right? What is the problem? Why do our offenders not have problems? Ever notice that? What's going on this week? What's your biggest challenge you had this week? Well, I live in a halfway house. It's been pretty easy. That doesn't sound easy. You live in a halfway house. That does not sound easy. Just that statement doesn't sound easy. Okay. So I'm going to teach you something. It's called the stages of change. Have you ever heard of the stages of change? Was it 1983? Is it, I guess, where it was developed. CSC uses this. Parole officers are taught this. I've taught it to parole officers. Programs, it's built into how we identify what needs to change. Hope we can all see that. Maybe I won't use red next time. So what it says here, you guys have the handouts, right? Can't read it on their own, darn. Okay, so I'll read it out. So this here, or this pie chart I have here, the first one says pre-contemplation. Pre-contemplation. Okay? First box says pre-contemplation. Second box says contemplation. Third pie says preparation and planning. Action, maintenance, slip. I couldn't figure out how to get the exit in here, but that should be an exit. That arrow is saying basically the habit's gone. So, anyone seen this before?
What is after action?
After action is maintenance, and then the next one is slip. And the arrow is basically, and I'll explain all this in a second, is the behavior's gone. You've got over it. So somebody give me a habit that they kicked, that they feel like sharing.
Smoking.
Smoking. Okay, it's an easy one. What does pre-contemplation mean to everybody in here? What do you think the term contemplation, how would you describe it? Yeah?
Well, it's kind of that acceptance that maybe there is a problem, where the fuzzy thought starts to come to you that maybe there's something.
Right. You're kind of sitting on the fence. You're not sure which decision. You know, maybe I'm going to try something different or stick with what I already know how it works. So pre-contemplation is that stage before that. There is no problem. Right? No problem whatsoever. So when you hear I have no problem a lot, ask yourself, where are they in the stages of change? If they never identify a problem with their lifestyle choices and the things that are going on. Contemplation is where we want our clients to get to, right? So you came over and you said, Scott, I want to quit smoking. I said, why? And you gave me a long list of why you wanted to quit smoking. You're definitely in that contemplation stage that this isn't working for you anymore. Tired of smelling like a smoke, tired of how it makes me feel, tired of having to go out, it's commanding my behaviors, all those things, right? So now you're contemplating what I'm going to do about it. And now they're talking to me because they're saying, hey Scott, how do I change this? Right? So I'm sitting there going, okay, well, let's come up with some plans. Let's look at this, right? So we're coming up with some plans to quit smoking. Well, maybe you don't have that coffee first thing in the morning. And when you're in the car, You got some triggers, you gotta come up with some gum maybe you put in your mouth, right? So we start to come up with some preparations to change the behavior. But we have to throw in something that gratifies that need. It gives them some support, right? And it makes it healthy and a positive change for them. That gratification we talked about earlier. And then they put that action into play. And then they get to a point where, hey, I don't crave cigarettes. It's been 3 weeks and I've had 1 or 2 cravings and I'm doing all right, right? And then we have a slip. But you know what? After the slip, oh, that tasted gross. Oh, what was I thinking? Get back on the wagon. You go through that whole cycle again because you had to talk yourself into having the cigarette, right? Had to talk myself into the cigarette, had the slip, but then I'm quickly like, oh, what am I thinking? Back in here, and I'm back on track. That's changing behavior, biting your nails, smoking, whatever it is you're trying to change, right? It's never a problem, you're never going to change it. You can throw anything in there. Eating, whatever behavior you want to throw at me, can walk you through this. I hope that this all makes sense. Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, pretty straightforward, right? So this is what we facilitate to even the guys. I share this sometimes. When I'm lost for an option, I don't know what to do, I teach them about the stages of change. And then I ask them where they think they are. Oh, I'm in the action stage. Tell me why, and then they can't tell me why. Where do you think you are then if you can't answer that question? Maintenance? Okay, let's answer some questions. They can't give me the answers. We get back to contemplation. They usually can give me a list of reasons why they want to continue the behavior and reasons why they want to stop. Pros and cons. Yes?
It's kind of a weird question.
Yes.
What about someone that gets over something just out of sheer willpower and won't admit some of these other things? Is that going to last if it's just that willpower?
Good question. I think, yeah, it's a good question. We talk about substance abuse, you see that quite a bit. There are probably going to be lots of slips, right? But they're definitely contemplating the change for whatever is driving that change they want to change. With our guys, sometimes it's just prison, right? I'm going to change the way I'm acting because it's not worth it. They still have all the cravings and the desires, but it's overwhelmed by the other things, right? That makes them contemplate that behavior. Ultimately, I think you're going to end up in slips if you're just white-knuckling it, right? If you talk to addiction courses and stuff like that, people that are white-knuckling it, eventually, I think they're going to fall off the wagon because they haven't really developed any of those preparations. They haven't done enough planning, ultimately. Yeah.
But teach them the $64,000 wheel, right?
Yeah.
Give them that reward and that challenge.
That's right.
They're the easy ones to teach.
Yeah, exactly.
Does both come into that fight
Sure. Yeah.
in the end? Because you need to have both at the end.
Yep. Right, so how do they get, what's driving that? Because I mean, hope falls in contemplation. What is it? If it's hope that you're hoping for, if you got some hope or you got something you're trying to change a behavior for, that's the driving force behind you looking into other ways of doing it. So hope falls in all of it, right? But hope doesn't drive it. It's planning. It's action, right? Which, do our guys do well at planning? And what are their actions telling us? A lot of the time. What are their actions telling us a lot of the time? That's a rhetorical question. I think you had a question.
Thank you. We have to tell him that everything really seems to be okay, and he never has any problems. Life really does appear to be good. How do you challenge that? I know you've just said everybody says that, but it seems to be the way.
That's right. Because they want us to believe that, by the way. They want us to believe that everything's all right. Right?
Yeah.
So, and they want to believe that everything's all right. Right? And maybe there isn't a lot of big challenges in their life. But if we go back to the crime cycle, what do we know about their behavior? If we look at the crime cycle, we know that it didn't happen overnight. Where did things go wrong? They probably didn't have any problems then either. probably told themselves and everyone around them, everything's great. That's the problem right there. They're not recognizing they're having problems and they're not getting help.
Okay, so how do you recognize the difference between that and when they're actually at exit?
That is a good question. I think it's action. I think it's just in their behavior. You're seeing it constantly, right? Maureen mentioned a guy recently that we both are working with. She said, I hadn't met him yet, said this guy's great. Everything looks sharp. I met him, wow, he's sharp, he's on top of it. His actions aren't actually following suit after 2 sessions with him. 2 sessions with him, I'm going, okay, it's a smokescreen. He's learned all the language, he's learned how to, but you know what? I'm already recognizing that he's not here. He thinks he's here, or at least is trying to sell me on that. But he's probably in this area here. So I have to focus in on him there. I'm not going to treat him here. Right? So I'm going to get into more depth to answer those questions you're asking, and how this works.
I just want to bring something else that occurs to me, and this is something you have to back up from where you talked about the first page there, about getting to know the person. You have to be able to recognize their pattern of talking to you. You have to recognize words and phrases that they use and what they mean to them.
Yeah.
They've learned this. You got to really listen to them a lot.
Yes.
And then you have to question about some of those things so you get their interpretation of it. So when you get into the heat of a discussion and you hear those phrases, you know what they mean to them. They don't mean that to the general public and to everything else, but they mean it to them.
That's right.
And that's where you catch them and you call them on it.
That's
And
right.
you bring them back to the action plan. Because they can tell you a good game plan sometimes, but when you start getting them, asking the hard questions, you rile them up a bit, and then you learn these little speech patterns that they have, these little ideas that they have, and you call them on it, and you bring that up. I think it's really important that you get that aspect of investigation, if you like.
Yep.
Because the rest of this, they can kind of, as we've already talked about, they can kind of breeze you around the circle there, and oh, looks really good. So wait a minute, something's missing here because you told me that word, and that word to you means something entirely different when you go back.
Thank you. Exactly. Emotion. Pay attention to emotion. Right? If you challenge a guy who's telling everything's great, and you just poke one hole in his plant, watch his behavior. He's going to get frustrated. He's going to trip over his words. He's going to come up with all the answers and describe. He's going to spend more time trying to convince you it's not a problem than giving you reasons how he's going to deal with it. Yeah.
In response to Gabriel's
Yes.
down there, when, they say it didn't happen again and everything's good, one of the biggest problems I find with that is it's because of their excuse, I'll use the word excuse, for their offense. Either at that time they did drugs, or they drank, or they were in a bad marriage thing, or she pushed him, but you know what I mean? So that situation's gone now. I don't drink and I don't do drugs. Or I'm not married. So I think to follow up on your question, Gabriel, it was very difficult because they come up with this. If I didn't do this, I could marry. You're not seeing it as the whole picture you're talking about.
That's right.
What caused them to drink?
That's right. And they're so worried and overcompensating and proving that everything's great that they're missing a lot. So, I think everybody's got the stages of change down. I put relapse, as you can see, in pre-contemplation. The reason I did that is because if you're in a relapse, your thinking, your decision-making, everything you're doing is pre-contemplation. You've convinced yourself that it's okay. Even if it's just for a short period of time, it's okay. Okay?
Have to have a new plan.
You're gonna have to reevaluate that. So in NA and talking to a lot of addicts and stuff, they'll say, well, it was just a slip. And I'll say, okay, well, tell me about your slip. Well, Friday night, I went out and I met my ex-girlfriend. I know I shouldn't have met her. It was a bad idea. When did you start first thinking you were gonna meet up with her? And then I break down the whole process. And the guy's relapse started on Monday. He was thinking about drugs on Tuesday. He was thinking about her. He contacted her on Wednesday, right? And then sometime in Thursday, he was in contemplation about doing bad behavior. And then by Friday, he threw caution out the wind, and he was in a full-blown relapse that lasted 6 months. He was already made up his mind. He was in a relapse. The thinking behind the relapse is more important than the action. A slip is an action. It's one time and you're right back in contemplating, why did I do that? That was stupid. You're running to the parole officer, you say, I'm so dumb, I should have never done that. Can you help me? I don't want to go back to jail, right? You're not going to the parole officer after you've been proven that you've used to get help, right? Challenge we encounter with our clients. I can't remember what this slide's about. Let me get a second here. Okay, I was going to ask you guys, what are the challenges we run into with our guys? I think you guys have mentioned a bunch of them already, right? For each of the following character traits, can you guys give me a quick example of how you would identify or behavior that might match a trust issue? What would we look for if a guy's having trust issues with us? How would you know it's a trust issue thing?
Well, when they say everything's fine.
Everything's fine, yeah. So,
I'm willing to talk to you.
right?
I'm willing to talk to you.
Yeah, not really getting anywhere with it, right? So pay attention to that. That is the problem we have to work on. Stages of change. Where do we start with this guy? He doesn't trust us. Problem number one for us to help them with trust. Now we have a target, we have something to work with. Right? That's going to make the next conversation easier because we're going to have a plan to deal with that barrier.
I know from faculty, an example that we have, it's like you can tell in the groups that we've been in, and still too, that you can tell when they trust you. It's like a line. It just comes, they tell you something that could, maybe it could be used against them or something, and you know that trust. And usually it's just before you've done something, you've exceeded their expectations, and you've been there for them, and then all of a sudden you see that trust is there, and it's just a whole different ballgame. A whole different ballgame once that's there. And I think that's the foundation, like you said, it's the most important thing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Don't have to add anything to that. I mentioned earlier, it's a triage approach. I'm going to explain that. I'm in search and rescue, that's why I'm using that term. I'm about to quit because I just don't have the time for it, which sucks, but just ran out of time. But who cares about all of my story? I'm going off topic. Trust issues is one of the things we have to work on. So it's a problem we recognize. You need to come up with a plan. Self-centeredness. What does that look like?
Everything else is the problem, but I'm fine.
Just I statements all over the place, but there's focus on why they're great.
We're not interested in anyone else.
Right, don't even ask anything about anyone else, yeah.
Well, yeah, anybody else, and there's no concept of what they're doing, how it affects anybody else.
No ability to see what
There's
other
also a
people
bit
are
of
thinking.
that, how's the world been getting along without me stuff?
That's right. Totally unaware, right? Just absolutely unaware. So when we see that, what are we going to tackle? What are we going to work on as a group, as our circle? Where do we start? We got some ideas, don't we? We got some plans now. Poor problem recognition. We talked about that. Think of a client you have right now. It's just you're just sitting next to the table going, "What? How did you not see that was going to happen?" Anybody have an example? Just yeah.
Just going and buying something they can't afford it.
Beauty. That's such a good example, right? Like, no thought of consequence whatsoever. or even thinking about their future, or anything, just creating problems wherever they go, and not having a clue what they're doing. Right? Back to why? Because they've never been taught how to do it. So where do we start? Right? Where can we work to help build this? I know that a lot of guys come and they say, oh, my CoSA group got me a day planner. I'm like, yay! Step one in the right direction for you to learn to solve some of your problems. Right? Now we got to teach them how to use it, how to budget, how to walk them through that. Because they're not going to know how, and they're not going to keep doing the behavior if we can't get them to buy into the behavior, the new behavior. Poor time management. One of the groups is working with a fellow that I have. He's got a cane. He's an older guy. He might have some health issues right now. He came to my group and he said, I got a private. He didn't say it this way. He was very blatant and told me about his physical ailment. It was very personal, and I kind of just was, what? I'm not a doctor, but doesn't sound good. So I talked to him about talking to CoSA to hopefully get his support. Maybe he can help him get to the doctor. His biggest fear was the person at the front gate of going to see a doctor. He didn't want to talk about his private issue because, what do I do? Do I go up and say, like, I got this? And I'm like, well, you could just, and this is all I said, you could say I have a private matter. And he went, that is brilliant. Like, he was blown away. And I'm sitting there going, oh. But the was, that is how simple it is. That is how simple our help can go so far, by helping them identify these ways of dealing with problems, right? And solutions. That had nothing to do with poor time management. The reason I brought him up is because he reached in his pocket and he said, I've got all these appointments. So after he went to the doctor, he pulled out these pieces of paper and threw it on the table, and I said, what are those? Right? And he picks up, this one's for an appointment on whatever, this one, I have another one, and he pulls out his wallet and finds some more pieces of paper, and I just went, okay, stop, right? We need to work on that. First and foremost, before we do anything, let's look at your budget, let's look at your time management, let's look at how we can start reeling that in, get a to-do list going, start dealing with one problem at a time. Loneliness, how does that look? Yep.
Yeah, we just talked about this last week, and I was amazed by it, because I kept thinking, why don't you start making friends, right? And they came out with this idea that I never thought about it. What if they are around with some friends and they run into something that they recognize, and I never thought about that. So I didn't put that thing in the equation of them making friends.
That's right.
Because they are terrified by the thought that, what if I meet somebody who recognizes me and I don't know how much drama they're going to bring, and I'm with this new friend and I can tell them. Like all this thinking.
Yeah, you're bang on it. These are the things as CoSA supports, you're really going to have to pay attention to, because every friend they make, they have to share with a parole officer. And there has to be a community assessment. We're going to talk about conditions after, I'll explain all that later. But there's a big process and a big fears associated with all of that. So there's a lot going on for them. But how do they hide their loneliness? Because they don't often just come out, some do, but they don't always come out and say, I'm lonely, do they?
No.
So what kind of behavior have you seen where they're not presenting the behavior, and how do we identify if it's just truly they're lonely at this moment? What might we pick up on?
I think you asked the questions about what they're doing with their time, and you get an idea from that. If they're alone in their room or some other place and didn't know, and they have no conversations with other people, then yes, that's probably something that's a problem.
The other things they're going to do is, every time they come see you, like they were just jacked to come to their CoSA meeting. They've been locked up in their town, their halfway house. They don't get along with other inmates, right? Whatever it is. And they come come to your meeting and they're just jacked and they, right, all about them. They're just so happy to have someone to talk to in an audience. They're probably lonely. Maybe we should start there, right? Maybe we'll get behind the self-centeredness issue, right? And then there's all those problems you mentioned.
And another thing is that when maybe some weeks you see the risk factors come back, it's all like, when you don't get other types, we were talking about other types of love last time, and we told them if you don't get, there's so many types of love you can get.
Yeah.
It's not just about the sexual part.
That's right.
We were saying you have a hole. You can fill it with sex. You want to fill it with sex mostly, but there's so many other ways you can fill it.
That's right.
So,
And bang on, like when it comes to the sex offending, that's one example of why people sex offend, right? It's that need. And they believe that that's love. Like in their own way, they deserve it, and their victim is put second to all the problems that they're facing. Maybe they're even the cause of it in their mind at the time, right? So it's a buildup of all these things. And that's why I'm going over this, is because it's all these little things are their crime cycle. Trust issues, self-centeredness, poor problem management, poor time management. They're lonely. It's a buildup. What are they doing with their time? They surf in the internet for sexual content 12 hours a day because they're lonely and they're looking for sex. When I put it in there, I just wanted to, this example I'm going to go through, treat it very loosely. It's just a quick example to show a level of how we approach in triage, and what I meant by that when I said that earlier, okay? So here's an example for you. A child walks up to you, child you know in your neighborhood, they're crying, they're kicking a can, right? They got a cut on their knee, it's bleeding, they're pouting, they're talking negatively. They look like so they're crying, they're angry, and you see this child. And it's a child you know, so you're not going to ignore the child. You shouldn't probably ignore the child anyway, but sometimes we do, I guess. But in this circumstance, we say we're going to engage. So how do we know what the problem is here? What do we do? How do we tackle it? How would you tackle it? Engage them. Think about engage them. Ask them a question. What happened? I fell off my bike. My darn bike. Right? And then what do you do?
How can I help?
How can I help? Oh, my mom, she's just sitting there in her office all day today. Okay? Now what? Knee's still bleeding, by the way.
Let's take you home to mom.
Can I take you home to mom? Well, she's not even going to notice. She's so busy working right now.
And try to convince that child that that's not true and that mom
Okay.
is needed and to find out.
Right. So this line of questioning, we're getting more than we bargained for. And as it's happening, what happens is we start to put in our own versions or some thoughts of this. And really what we need to focus on, and what I'm focusing on with you guys today, is the triage approach, which is what are the problems? If I want to build trust with someone, I'm going to clean that knee up first. Because when you help somebody, they never forget it. Ever. Right? You do that old magic, warm up the hands. This is magic. It's going to make everything feel better. You touch the knee and the kid goes, big smile. And right? That kindness goes a long way. Right? As you talk to that child, you find out all those other things I was sharing with you. Right? But you got that rapport already started. So you start asking the child all the questions you guys shared. Right? And they find out that they're bleeding and their mom's busy and not paying attention to them and they didn't arrange a play date and the child's upset. There's a whole bunch of things going on. And again, just an easy, simple example that we're using just to show you something. Right? In all of that, we probably have our thoughts about the family at this point, right? But really this parent is a great parent. She's always attentive, dealing with a child, but there's been an issue at school and whatever, right? What are some of the, I guess, traps or problems we create for ourselves when we're dealing with people's problems? Like, what are some things that we get caught up in? Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Sort of look to assign blame. Look to assign blame. What is the letter doing?
We start to conclude, right? And I want to really focus on don't do that. Don't focus on what we don't know. Don't put in assumptions and jumping into conclusions, because once we start doing that, we're creating problems. We're going to lose rapport real quick, right? Real quick. And they'll turn on us in a dime. So if you take this kid's side and you say, well, your mom is a pain in the butt, she never pays any attention to you, also the kid goes, don't talk that way about my mom. Now where'd your report go? Be careful of that with our offenders. Be very careful. But how do we better ourselves? We do that triage approach. Identify the problems. That child, in that example, had several problems. Help them solve their problems themselves. Don't do it for them. Help them solve their problems. Using new behaviors, new actions, new ways of communicating, new skills. Okay? We earlier talked about problem solving. I asked you for 5 steps of problem solving. Here's what ICPM teaches in the program I deliver. This is the focus of problem solving. Exactly the same thing. The reason I asked you, and the reason I ask every one of my clients to tell me how they solve problems, and they give me a list of 5 things, and it's usually almost identical to this. This group today, you basically said that when I asked you how to solve problems. You focus on the situation, the facts, the feelings, the goals. That's what we teach. You have a problem, focus on that. What is the situation? How do you feel? What is your goals to get over this? Stage 2, what are your options to achieve that goal? Well, I'm going to have to manage my emotions first off, take a few days to think about it, whatever, come up with some options. Now I'm going to put together a plan. And now I'm going to take action, and I'm going to step back and say, did that work or didn't it work? And then reevaluate. The triage approach that I was talking about, you walk into a situation, there's a whole bunch of problems all the time with our offenders. Where they tell you there's no problem, there's 30 problems. And they might be as simple as time management issues. It might be as simple as somebody who's being mean to them at the halfway house. But if we identify and get them comfortable with sharing what these problems are, we can help them learn to solve their problems. And this is the language they've learned, right here. You can use this and say, I know in program you use some sort of model to solve your problems. You've identified, today in CoSA, we've identified like 3 problems you're facing. How would you use that program skill to solve this problem? Now you're speaking the same language as their corrections. I don't necessarily say take that angle, but I just want you to know that they know these things. And we can use it to better them and use it together. Okay? So another scenario, offender is overwhelmed, laments about how he was released with no ID and reports that CSC has done nothing to prepare them for their release. We've all heard it. What is a trap we might fall into? Let's start with that. It's the first thing we do.
Gee, that's too bad.
Gee, that's too bad. Okay. What else? What is another trap? Sometimes do we believe them? God, the CSC does screw up a lot, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Right? I do it all the time. Oh yeah, it's a huge organization and we forgot about you. I can understand where you're coming from. That's a trap. I just got sucked in. Because I just took him completely off what the real problem is, didn't I? What's the real problem? Is it CSC the problem, guys? No. What's the problem?
He didn't plan.
Sorry?
He didn't plan himself, make plans for himself.
Okay. I know my SIN number off by heart. I could lose my card 1,000 times. I still know my SIN number. I know my driver's license number. I don't know about you guys, but I've memorized that because it's good for my passwords. So I have to make 1,000 million passwords. I should have told you that. I know what my password is. Oops. So, yeah, there's a bunch of things this person's doing wrong and has been doing wrong up to this point. To lose their ID, it's not CSC's fault. Are you kidding me? I'm not going to tackle it, say it's not CSC's fault, and wave my finger in their face. I'm going to say, what can you do to better this situation? How are you going to fix this problem? You don't have a SIM card. What are you going to do? Right? Help them identify what the problem is. Disorganized. I mean, the main problem is they don't have ID. So moving forward, all we have to focus on is helping them solve their problem. And not get caught up in all the nonsense that surrounds the problem. Okay? Chia's approach, right? Address the knee injury, talk to the person, get to know the problem, help them identify the problem. Go talk to your mom and tell her how you feel. Done. Nothing more I need to do.
Scott, I just think they would have problem with sometimes that I remember that they can't go anywhere. I mean, these can't go to, we try to get them to go to libraries, maybe to be a book club or because there's children there or the daycare close by. And to me, it's frustrating from my point of view, hear the same things. How can I help him when he can't go anywhere, he can't talk to anybody? And so that's a bit frustrating. And the other thing is to blame in his past, the fact that he grew up in an abusive family, and it's their fault that he's doing now. But so what do I say to him? Well, just get over it, and how do you handle that kind of thing?
So I'm going to ask you another question.
Huh?
I'm going to ask you another question. What is the problem if they're telling you that I can't go to a playground? There's no reason to go to a playground. I can't go to a library. I can't use the internet. I can't. What do they need to do?
Well, I thought to be able to go into the place, but I'm just frustrated with the fact that he couldn't do these things.
But now we're buying in. Now we're buying into their complaining. We're not helping them with a solution. We're buying into why they can keep complaining and arguing, and the problem's forgotten because we're like, oh, I identify with that. That sucks that you don't have the internet.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So recently a pro officer comes to me and says, Scott, this guy wants an internet. This is a solution that we're working on right now. Pro officer says, I've talked to the psychologist, she's kind of on the fence with it. He wants the internet because of employment reasons, he's trying to become a plumber and it'll help, blah, 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 blah. It makes sense to schooling, on the road, right? He needs internet access. The world, we need the internet access today. He's been out over a year, he's doing well. Pro officer says to me, would you support this? I said, what kind of question is that? Like, do I support him using? No, I don't support him using that. He looks at sex offending stuff online and gets back into his crime cycle. I said, whose responsibility is it, Greg, to prove and be accountable? It's his. So I said, we got to get him to come up with the solutions. He's got to solve the problem and show us why we can count on him not to do those things. I shared that with him. He looked at me, balked at it at first, almost like a panic. And I said, don't worry about it. I said, come up with some, I don't know any solution. What am I going to do? I said, I just gave you the task at hand. I said, you have friends, you have family, go get help and come up with a list of things you can do to show you're accountable and we can trust you. I said, we'll do our part on our end, but you got to do your part. And that's where it is right now. So let's see what he comes up with. That's how we deal with this. That's how we deal with that. Don't get clouded by the nonsense that is their conflicts. Because they're not, when we focus on why we can't do something, we're not focusing on solutions. And I don't always have the energy to do that. Sometimes I just, yeah, you're right. It's terrible, you can't use the internet. I run out of steam sometimes.
We usually say to them, whether or not CSC is fair or whatever, that's not our purpose for being here. Our purpose is to help you to live with those conditions. How can we do that? We can help you change. We can't change CSC. So let's move with you.
Yeah. And I think that's the right answer, and then focus on any problems you're identifying, right? And try to get them to realize them. So some of the program skills they learn throughout their sentence and even after their sentence in my groups. Smart goal setting. I don't know if I talked about this stuff last time. Can't remember. SMART acronym stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So if you got a guy who's come up with a plan for whatever that problem is, so we go back to our problem process or stages of change. We've identified this person's lonely and we want to help them come up with some ideas to deal with it. We've got them to stop focusing on woe is me, and they're now moving into stages of coming up with plans to deal with something. Now you're going to ask them, what is your goal to quit smoke? Right? And they give you 3 ideas. Say, is that a SMART goal? Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it realistic? Is it timely? Is it going to get you? Is it going to meet that criteria? If it meets that criteria, that's one skill they can use over and over again. Right? They can do a decisional balance, pros and cons. Sit down with you guys. Let's do the pros and cons right here. We got a piece of paper. Let's do it together. Right? Helping them move through that stage of change in a positive, productive way. Yep.
Can you say what that SMART?
It's specific, measurable, achievable, timely, and I forgot the R, didn't I? Realistic. Timely. So if your goal meets all that criteria, it's probably a good goal. Or maybe on the right track. So that's something that we teach in the program. Something easy that you guys can rely on. And if you go on the internet and type in SMART goals, you'll see it with companies, you'll see it with, it's not just an ICPM or corrections thing. There's lots of different companies that use this acronym. So they're not going to associate it just with corrections. Or if they do, you can say, no, I learned that at work. It's nothing to do with corrections. Like if you want to just kind of keep that separation. Social skills. The ones that we focus on, asking for help, receiving and expressing feedback, giving feedback, which is a little wordy there. Perspective checking, assertive expression, active listening, and negotiations. This is what we spend a lot of time. They get leaflets with information. Active listening is one of them. Just skills to do those things to get better at it.
Yeah, it's funny, like for someone that's come out, a sexual offender, say, that's come out after term in prison and trying to reintegrate, and let's suppose they're friendly, make friends easily.
Yep.
And so they get into various, different places where they make new friends, but then they find that after they can only go kind of so far, because then they reach a point where people begin to wonder, like, why do you have to be home at 10 o'clock? Or things like this, and then they're worried about people discovering that they were in prison and why they were in prison. But any suggestions for how to deal with that?
Everybody heard that question?
Yeah.
There is no one solution here, right, for this question. That is hard as heck. I have no idea what it must be like. Because any character flaw of mine, I treat myself pretty filthy about that. right? Like I feel guilty, I feel angry at myself when I repeat a behavior, but I didn't sex offend against somebody, and the world doesn't dislike me because of mine. That's just me that dislikes me. So we're dealing with the two things here, right? Their shame, their guilt on the internal, and they have to deal with the external, and the letdown, the lack of acceptance. As you probably know, as you've worked with guys historically and through your experience, when they actually start getting a foothold in meeting people, they actually say, it's amazing how many people actually let me in their lives. So, do you guys hear that often? My employer actually is okay with me working for them. So part of it is their internal fear of moving forward. We have to help them develop a skill set that allows them to deal with that internal stuff, well as also using these skills up here to approach it, right? As we said earlier, these guys have a lot of difficulty in life, and part of it is they're socializing with people. So if we can build these skills, hopefully we can get better. If I'm not good at receiving feedback, my reaction to any criticism is anger, emotional, ridiculous, because I'm hurting on the inside and I don't know how to manage it. So if we can direct them back to saying, it's okay to get criticism, it's okay to get feedback. You know, I just gave you some feedback, Des, and it didn't feel very comfortable. Why don't you give me some feedback and watch how hard it is to give feedback, and watch how hard that person struggles with it. And then break down, you just did a whole bunch of perspective checking, because you were worried you were going to hurt my feelings. I had to go through the same thing when I was giving you feedback. There's a lot to be learned in that little exercise, right? These are the skills that they're going to have to learn to survive in life. And with their big problem that was pointed out, getting to know people, will people accept me? They're going to have to use every ounce of those skills, including those internal ones, to hopefully get forward. And yes, it's a huge hurdle. Huge. Okay.
So just to also respond to that, is the fellows do not want to have to remember what happened, thinking about a particular case that maybe even Peter's talking about. I mean, he is the deal, and it's very, very easy to see him in a pro-social way and forget what he's done, but he's really stepped over the line in a very serious way. And is it a good thing that people just accept him and he can go everywhere? I'm not sure about that. So, and the one other thing I'd like to say, the social skills that you talk about here. Earlier you talked about when they come in and just talk, right? And that's another teaching point is, you know what? We're here to help you to learn to be pro-social. I'm sure you've had years of being in prison and no one listening to you, but you have to learn that balance. You have to listen to other people too.
One thing that we need, thank you cards. And they come to the group and say, it was so helpful to have that assistance this week from somebody. And as an example, one guy is leaving a halfway house and going into his own apartment now. And he's got a stack of thank you notes to write to the drug and addiction person, everybody that helped him, and start working on it now. So by the time you leave at the end of the month, you'll have them all written out and you hand them out. You don't have to have money to do something like that. And we gave one of our CMs that didn't have restrictions, he got an iPad, a used iPad from one of our connections from the group. And he wrote a thank you note, a beautiful thank you note. She was so touched, she wrote him back another note. So it just reinforces pro-social skills.
Yeah, and on the simple end of that, that was a trust-building example, big time. But on the simple side of it, if the person's just sitting there and they're new out to the community, and they're just talking about themselves, that narcissism is just overflowing. Identify their need, identify the problems, right? But at this point say, hey Jim, what have you observed from us today? And that, you can end your session with that, because after he talks about, or she talks about what they observed from you guys that day, you were active listening, you were using all these skills. And then just say, next time we meet with you, it's our turn to talk. And it's your turn to show us that you can actively listen. Right? Simple as that. What an easy thing that person just learned.
So in Peter's example, where he used the example of had to be home by 10 o'clock, and somebody specifically asked him, why do you have to be home at 10 o'clock? So in the CSC model, what is the suggestion? Are you telling the truth, not the truth, a partial truth? What do you suggest in your model?
Okay. It's very individual based. Does he have the skills to? If he doesn't have the skills to, he's lying to the friends, right? In my opinion. At this point, he's just...
What?
If he doesn't have the skills to have that conversation, he's probably going to have to come up with a good line for himself.
Right.
That he's just going to have to use. And maybe he can do that with CoSA, right? If he has the skills, and this is where it's very individual, right? If he doesn't have the skills, we're going to have to try and get him up there, right? But for now, it's probably best that he comes up with a list of good examples or excuses, right? And we'll work on those skills. But always point out to that person that at some point they're going to have to, in a relationship, in a friendship, they're going to have to share more detail. At some point they're going to have to. Because ethically, we all know the best thing is honesty. And that's the struggle. So we got to get them to that stage where they're comfortable and they can use these skills to be able to move forward. So that's the best I can do for that answer.
And personally, very rarely do I think they should be honest about those things. Whether it's with someone you're seeing or whether it's a relationship. But I think in the circles where the fellows do have more problems, say developmentally challenged, you'll see them doing a role play, and so the volunteers will role play it. So they might say, yeah, I do go early, but in the long run I feel better when I get up in the morning for not having been so late. And you give them all these ideas. And those pro-social ways of responding and that are safe for them are really important, that we show them that.
That's right. Yep, exactly. I always use examples from my life with that exact thing. So if somebody shared it with me, just very briefly, I'm totally going off track, but based on what Maureen said, and sorry, I don't know your name. Bob said, I didn't know your name. Just forgot it. Was that I'll often go, when I was younger, and I'll take out my flip chart, because I get a marker and a flip chart. When I was younger, I was running around, doing whatever, go drinking, go hang out with my friends, stay up late for no particular reason. And throughout my life, I go to parties or hang out with people and whatever. I said, at 40, I'm actually older than 40, but at 40, I realized that something had changed. I realized that when I went out with my wife or girlfriend or whatever, that didn't sound very good. I have an ex-wife, that's why I wasn't trying to give up too much information about myself. So now I've given you my access to all my, anyway, I'm not very discreet, am I? Anyway, so if I go out with my girlfriend today, and we're going out to a party, then, I have a plan. And it's a smart plan. Because after 11 o'clock, nothing good happens. I don't know who you guys are, but after 11 o'clock, that party has to end for me. Because either I'm getting too drunk and being stupid. That's not normally the case anymore because I have smart goals. But somebody is going to. Someone there is going to. And I'm going to feel embarrassed for them. I'm going to feel embarrassed. I'm going to hate being there. So I leave 11 o'clock. And I use this example to show that progression of learning. And wake up the next day, I feel great. My girlfriend and I go for a hike, and we feel good. And then we hear about all the debauchery, and I'm so glad I missed it, right? And so I just use that example to say, this is why I leave at 11 o'clock. Because a good night's rest is better than, right?
So we're down to 9 minutes.
All right, we're almost there. Decisional balances, pros and cons, pretty straightforward. Use that all the time. They're good at it if you take the time to work on them with them. Emotions management, just help them identify that they're going through an emotional. How do you bring your emotions down, right? You seem really agitated. You feel, something's going on emotionally. I don't know what it is, but I can see it. Why don't you just take a few minutes? We'll all just sit here and breathe for a minute, exercise, some breathing. Use that silence in those circumstances. Don't say a word. Leave the room silent and watch them. They'll fill the emptiness with something.
I think if then.
Sure, I'm not going to answer the question yet. I'm going to come back to it. If you could write it down, and then I'll take your questions because I want to get through the last 9 minutes. Sorry. And you haven't asked a question, and I want to answer your question, but if you could just hold on to it for a few minutes. Okay. Thought stopping. Just getting them to take a moment. Stop talking. Take a moment. Think. Think about what you're saying. Do you ever stop and think about what you're saying? It's hard to do, right? Let's all just sit and think about what we're thinking. It's a good practice. Turn to management plans. We talked about management plans last time, right? I've got this big problem, blah, 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 and everybody's at fault for it. Well, where's your management plan? When you came out, we developed some management plans. Are you using those management plans today? Focus back on them, right? Self-monitoring. I put a little statement in there. They always tell me they're self-monitoring. I said, show it. So ask them. Anytime they're telling you they're doing a behavior, ask them to show you how they're doing it. Explain to you what they're doing. What methods they're doing. If there's no action or follow through on that next question, they're not doing it. Why? There's a problem there. If somebody can't ask, if you ask somebody, if you're self-monitoring, paying a lot of attention to your behavior, tell me what you've noticed that's a problem. And they can't give you an answer. They're not doing a very good job at self-monitoring. They're failing miserably. Because you should be walking out every time with something you're learning. So focusing on efficiency, for lack of time, I'm going to have to be more efficient. CoSA friends asked about to provide examples, so I'll just go through this quick. Building rapport, I think we did a pretty good job at answering that and coming up with some examples for that. Right? Show a lot of empathy, firmness, heavy sprinkled kindness and patience. We'll build that rapport with them. We are not going to know if they are lying to us. They are good at lying. It's just the reality. It's the skill that they've learned. This is not a reflection of ourselves. Many of our clients are skilled at. Don't wear it, talk about ours. If we get lied to and we feel hurt, talk to our members, right? Discuss it. Don't own it all yourself, because that'll drive you crazy. Be careful not to turn on one another. These guys are very skilled at making one person feel bad for them and the other one saying, I don't feel bad for them. And now we're fighting and we're not even paying any attention to the problem because now we're fighting. Our egos have been involved. What the heck? Right? Happens all the time with case management and corrections. The communicating amongst ourselves by regular communication with the parole officers, avoid that from happening because I've always communicated. I know their games. And their games are just skills that they've learned to use. It's not a game, it's just how they function. But if I'm communicating with my colleagues, we catch it. We deal with it. Pay attention to the emotions of the offender. If we can narrow in on the emotion, we can do that triage. We can find out what each problem is. And then we can start developing plans to deal with it. Ask if it was a struggling, if I was struggling with that, what would I do? So if you see their struggle, ask yourself, what would I do in that situation? How did I solve that problem when I didn't fit in when I was a kid? Am I still holding on to it? Do I still have some begrudgement towards somebody because they picked on me when I was 19? I'm still holding on to that? Well, I'm not doing a very good job of that either. Now I can empathize with where they're coming from. Pay attention to your own experiences, and then redirect it back on them. Share your example, then say, what can you learn from that? Help them uncover the problem and develop action plans. We've already talked about that. Action planning. Focus on what's not being said. The emotions, everything I just went through, right? Trust our gut feelings and challenge them. If we make a mistake with our gut feeling, we jump to a conclusion, own it. You know what? You're right, I jumped to the conclusion. I'm sorry I did that. Own it. You just demonstrated some great skills by owning your problem. Don't argue. If they are arguing with you, they are distracting us from what the real problem is. People don't argue with you other than to get their own way. Think about a car salesman who's, they're just trying to sell you something. Every argument is somebody trying to get their own way, or two people trying to get their own way, and it's usually emotionally based. It's a distraction from the real problem. Identify together a list of tasks, this is for you guys, tasks that they can work on, that you can bring, and help them to take on those tasks. So you can have your list of tasks, but our goal is to get them to follow the stages of change. So don't tell them to do the list. Know your list and get them to believe they came up with it. Little trick, the trade. Pay attention to their directions through follow, and then follow through, right? How are you following through with that? I give them day planners, or not day planners, but logs, and I tell them to log every day things that are going on. And that is some way that they can keep track and log how they're doing. And if they're not doing it after you ask them to do that, they're not following through, they're not showing that action. Debrief and collaborate with each other, we talked about that. Establish a process. Collateral contacts for CSC, parole areas. Maureen will come to myself, or she'll go to other people and ask for, not solutions, but ideas of problems that are encountered. She doesn't give me specific details, but she says, I'm having a hard time getting through to this client. What are some things that you can say about that? And then I come back with maybe some examples, and then you can share it. But it's just showing that opportunity, that we're bigger than just the three of us. We've got all sorts of resources. I'm here today, right? And I'm learning all the time from you guys as well. So come up with a process for that. So the experts, they call me an expert, an SO specialist. I am furthest thing from an expert. I'm just a guy who's been doing this for a lot of years. My philosophy is that experts are just always learning. Because that's all I'm doing, and if someone calls me an expert in this field, whatever. Okay. I just try to follow my professionalism, right? I come to these types of things because I learned something here and get to present. Gives me opportunity to work on my skills, learn, always learning, but I always count on the rule of law, like ethics, right? What's good and right and fair, and I rely on personal. I already said that. And the support peers, that's the biggest thing. I need them. I need any idea I've ever came up with. I think, that was my idea. But you know what? You break it down, there was 4 conversations and everybody had input in that idea. We all want to have our ego responsible for the idea. But we all came up to it collaboratively. It wasn't just my idea. Someone always tries to own it though, especially my coworkers. Usually parole officers. I'll bash them today. Anyway, that wraps me up for my presentation. Thank you. Can I get that question from you?
It wasn't a question, it was just something that I was thinking. I think the ex-prisoner really have to forgive themselves first. When they forgive themselves, they will not forget it, but they will forgive themselves. So they will feel much better about themselves if they have learned how to forgive.
A very good point. That forgiveness, forgiving themselves will help them move on, and that's the point. That was just, it was, yeah, we have to help them lead them internally to find that place of forgiveness. And as we all know, that's just a long journey in life. And we're just gonna help them hopefully get there, right? So, thank you.
Do you have time for another one?
I'm actually gonna shut it down, I just didn't wanna miss that one, and then I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, and I'm part of another discussion after this, so.
So, wasn't that amazing? Let's give them another